Parents of Maine's most vulnerable children are speaking out after the U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit this week against the state of Maine for violating the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Federal attorneys say the state is failing to provide treatment beds and services for kids with mental health problems and developmental disabilities, leaving dozens of them stuck in emergency rooms across the state. Advocates say millions of dollars in federal funding are at risk if changes are not made soon to settle the case. News Center Maine's Vivian Lee has our update.
Christine Adams' son, Christian, has severe autism, is nonverbal, bipolar, and has other challenges. The 21-year-old who lives in a group home went into crisis earlier this spring.
And he threw all his toys out the window and his clothing, and I guess he was leaning out a second-story window. And I was afraid for his life.
He ended up in the emergency room at Maine Medical Center for 10 days, waiting for a treatment bed at Spring Harbor, the state's only residential program that accepts children and school-age patients with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This was Christian's second trip to the emergency room. He spent 3 weeks in the ER in 2021, but this time his mom had had enough.
Why isn't there any help for him? Like, why can't he go? Why isn't there a crisis bed for him? Like, how can other people, there are beds available, but not for my son.
She sent this letter about Maine's lack of treatment beds and services for people with disabilities to the Disability Rights section of the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. She believes her complaint helped spur a lawsuit filed by the DOJ this week. It accuses Maine of segregating children with behavioral health problems and disabilities in hospitals, residential facilities, and the Long Creek Youth Development Center.
I'm hoping this creates urgency. If it doesn't, things will get worse.
Nancy Cronin, the executive director of the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council, is on a blue ribbon commission taking a closer look at DHHS's behavioral health care system. She says if steps aren't taken soon, Maine could find itself once again under a consent decree.
If the lawsuit keeps moving forward, there's a risk that there will be an agreement that a judge, the judicial system, will take over for a period of time and make systems change.
Christine, meanwhile, had to quit her long-term job as a surgery technician to devote more time for Christian and her 19-year-old daughter, Haley, who is also on the autism spectrum. Christian now sees a psychiatrist regularly, but even with the feds putting the state on notice, her worries remain.
If my son's in crisis again, there's no place for him.
She believes fixing a broken system will take years, leaving her son and others like him without the safety net they desperately need. Vivian Lee, News Center, Maine.
A DHHS spokeswoman says state officials agree these services are critical and that they are in discussions with the Justice Department. Christine and other parents, by the way, will be meeting over Zoom with DOJ officials next week, and that is when civil rights attorneys will give families an overview of the lawsuit and listen to their concerns.